Superman has arrived in cinemas this weekend as not just a rebirth for this character, but as a birth of a new universe. James Gunn is the creative director of DC Studios, and this film carries the burden of being the first step for the new cinematic universe for DC. And what a film to start with. Superman is the ultimate superhero, a beacon of hope and a reflection of humanity. And whenever a new one of these films arrives, I think it's fair to say it's a pretty big deal. Helmed by director James Gunn, who is perhaps most well known for directing the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, he certainly brings a lot of those characteristics of that trilogy over to create the foundations of this new universe. And Superman is a film that feels born out of the love for the lore. It feels like both the character and the film really embody the spirit of a comic book. But before I add my opinion to the ever-growing wave of discourse around this film, I have to acknowledge how staggering that discourse has been. The film seems to have stirred up some really strong sentiments from a lot of people on both ends of the spectrum. And I'm going to say right off the bat, I didn't particularly love or hate this film. I fall firmly in the middle, but far from indifferent. I have a lot of thoughts about this one, a lot of positive and a lot of less than positives. But I was ready, like most of us, to accept this film with open arms. I really like Richard Donner's 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeves. It's one of the best superhero films out there. It has such a sentimental and heartwarming tone, but it's never naive. It feels so measured in what it wants to say. I think it establishes a character and origin story in a way few films have been able to do so convincingly. And then to mention Zack Snyder's 2013 refresh of Superman, Man of Steel, that film to me felt like a muddy and over-ambitious portrayal of the character. It felt a bit too cold. It didn't feel like hope to me. It was more obsessed with looking cool than feeling warm. But that film, just like the 1978 Superman, does spend time building its hero's origin and establishing a tone. One that in this case was much darker and grittier. But now we have arrived at the James Gunn reboot. And this 2025 Superman film is not just being presented as another reiteration of the character, it's being billed as a fresh start. A new hope for superhero films. At least that's what the lead up of this film has felt like. I think part of it comes from James Gunn himself, but I think this narrative has been pushed from the media and the fan base. But can you blame anyone with what Marvel has been doing in recent years and after the scattered remains of what became of the Snyderverse? It really feels like there's a lot at stake here. And when I sat down to watch this in a packed out IMAX theater on opening night, you could feel the anticipation, something I've not felt in the cinema for a long time. And whatever you think of the film, it never gets old watching a film on the biggest of screens with a full audience whooping and cheering and reacting in all the right ways. It's escapism at its finest, and it's a beautiful thing to share in. And before we go deeper into my thoughts on the film, please go and see this one for yourself. Revel in the cinematic experience of something that feels timely, that feels big, that feels like a spectacle of cinema. That alone to me is something to be celebrated. Regardless of my thoughts on the film's quality, this is a must-watch for any comic book fan. But what did I think? I'm not going to get into any spoilers. I won't mention any major plot points, but I will have to hint towards things here and there. But my favorite parts of this film were in the first hour. It's a curious setup, one that I think sounds great in theory, but experiencing it I felt a little less keen. I'm talking about the fact that this doesn't really have an origin story start, something that consumed the first 30 minutes of the 1978 film and the 2013 Man of Steel film. And in one breath, we all know the backstory of Superman. It's explored in great lengths in those films. So I understand the desire to get straight into the action, but in another breath, I kind of missed it. And it felt odd to me that it wasn't in here. And I think ultimately it hurts the emotional connection to the characters and the world building in this film. We don't see this Superman grow into Superman. We join the action with an already established narrative and threat, and that also does risk alienating new fans. Having said all that though, I do like this version of Superman. I think David Cornsweet is great, and what's interesting is this Superman has been beaten down a lot more. He feels more vulnerable, at times more frustrated and quick to emotion, but also a little more comfortable and more confident when he's on the battlefield. It's an interesting mix, and David Cornsweet does a great job emphasizing the lingering uncertainty he feels despite having built up some confidence as Earth's protector. But I also do believe in his deep desire for hope. But the one issue I do have here is that there isn't as much time spent with Superman as you would expect there to be, and you do feel his lack of presence in other scenes. I will of course avoid plot points, but there are a lot of components at odds with each other in this film. And unfortunately, a lot of those other components take away from time that should be spent establishing Superman's character, especially since there is no time spent on a traditional origin story. The rest of the cast are also great though, especially Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. I think she may even be my favorite portrayal of this character. She has a great air of quiet confidence, but also a strong, driving desire for justice done the right way, of course. And the chemistry she has with David Cornsweet is believable and entertaining. The best scenes in this film are when they are together. I will say, nothing quite reaches the heights of, say, the flight scene in the 1978 original, but in contrast, we do see Lois and Clark have more of an argumentative relationship at the start of this film, and I think it was an interesting way to establish their own characters' beliefs and where they are in their own respective arcs. Nicholas Hoult is chewing on all the lines he is given here as Lex Luthor, but I do wish he was given some better dialogue and also more screen time. I like Nicholas Hoult's performance, but the character felt a little one note to me, and at times not even the main threat. Crypto is also here. I'm sure you've seen him in the trailers. He doesn't have as much of a part in this film as I was expecting. He appears often enough, but mainly for comic relief and to challenge Superman's authority, something I will say I did grow a little tired of by the end of the film, but I can't deny I did love seeing him on screen. And finally, the other major highlight in the cast is Eddie Gathegi as Mr. Terrific. The Justice Gang, unfortunately, feel a little forced into this narrative, but Mr. Terrific's character is given a fair amount to do. He provides some of the better comic relief in this film, and he does feel quite integral to the overall plot. Now about that overall plot, for me, the film does start to get lost as we move into the second hour of the film. It becomes convoluted, messy, sporadic, with side plots mounting up and more characters being given screen time. The film veers into politics, social media. There's too much going on, and none of it's given enough time to be explored with any real meaning. I know a fear for a lot of people, myself included, was that when the trailer dropped for this, there would be too many characters. And, well, we were right. The film is not a very good juggler when it comes to many things: its characters, its tone, its side plots. It drops the ball a few times. It has a decently packed first half, but it starts to buckle by the second. And perhaps its greatest sin is it starts to feel contrived, designed, and thinking too far ahead. The intrigue becomes fatigue. A lot of films can be guilty of this, but none more so than big franchise blockbusters, ones that are intent on building something else other than the film you are watching. I really can't tell you how much I wished for this film to live in the now. Focus on the present and the character on the title card, instead of planning 6 films ahead. And it feels more obvious here because this film is not a typical origin story. We are already in the middle of the action. The film's structure is a bit of a head-scratcher. Some moments are stretched and some moments are cut short, and it felt like they only got a handful of scenes truly right. And I do think a lot of time is spent on awkward humor that undermines a scene and gives the film an overall uneven tone. That, to be fair, is what we have come to expect from comic book films, but it felt more noticeable here. Plot and characters aside for a moment, how is everything else? And the score is particularly great here. I loved the music choices. I loved the crescendos in the score in certain scenes. It's got the expected needle drops you want from a James Gunn film. And I like the use of music as a transitioning tool in a lot of scenes to build up a cut or an edit. There's a great 8-bit tinge to some of the tracks here, and that guitar riff on the main theme is awesome. The visuals in this this film are colorful, vibrant, perhaps a bit sickly at times. It's got the usual superhero flair to it, bright lighting, very busy CGI. And yes, there is a lot of CGI in this film. I think even more than I was expecting. Not on the level of Man of Steel, but there's a lot here, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it's a bit too garish. I've seen a lot of people say it, and it is true. This does feel like a comic book brought to life. It feels like you are flipping through a comic book at the speed of Superman flying around the Earth, and it all comes to life right in front of you. It's wonderful at times, maybe a little jarring at other times. The camera does a lot of spinning, sweeping, zooming. It really does get you to the heart of a scene or a panel. And then let's talk about the sentiment of the film. Is this film really a new hope? And not to ruin the escapism, the world we live in feels quite bleak, at least to me right now. And the endearing heart of Superman as a character is what I hoped might become the main focal point of this incarnation. And to an extent, it does, but it does feel like I'm listening to someone give a speech on hope. But all I can hear is someone either talking over it or laughing in the background. I really needed this film to spend some moments giving itself time to breathe, to reflect, to finish an emotion before Krypto comes crashing onto the scene and distracting everyone, including the scriptwriters. And that's fine. Not everybody wants something that sincere. I think audiences want to laugh and revel in the awe of great set pieces. I think even though there is a lot of us that aren't massive fans of that Marvel style of humor, it works for a lot of people. And it has worked in a lot of Marvel films in the past, but this one pushed it to the limit for me. But again, my audience did seem to really connect with it. I definitely think some of the things I wanted here are just not what other people wanted, which again is completely fine. Ultimately, I think this film is more attuned to what a Superman film should be, more so than Man of Steel was, but I wanted Superman the film, not Superman and the Justice Gang. The worst parts of this film to me are the universe building aspects. Not the characters themselves, just the way they are integrated into the plot. It's a film that attempts to speedrun this new universe's setup, and it stops itself from feeling like a fresh start because of it. And all the right ingredients are here. It's just the recipe was prepared in the wrong order. It feels like a mix of different comic book issues that got misprinted together, with the first issue omitted entirely. But let me be clear for a second. The frustrations I have are how I felt watching this. It was not the direction I'd hoped the film would go. And I think as film fans and critics and lovers of this medium, we can often get lost in what could or should have been instead of focusing on what's right in front of you. I don't think this is a bad film, and I think it has a lot of good and some great elements, but it falls short of being something truly great in my eyes. I will, of course, be watching it again, but I wanted to write a review after a first watch that felt honest, because I'm not indifferent on this film, even though my score might indicate that. I have too many contrasting and conflicting opinions on it, and to me, that's how the film comes across. It is a bit of a mess, but it's also damn good to see that cape flutter again. So it's a tentative 5 to a 6 out of 10 for me. I'm hoping that score improves on a rewatch, but I have to be honest. And even though for me this wasn't what I wanted to see in a Superman film, I can't deny that there is a faint glimmer of hope for this incarnation. But lastly, I also wanted to mention that amazing BBFC classification card that appears at the start of the film. Something I was not expecting at all, but it seems they ran a competition and this was the winner. I would love to see this type of thing more often. It really caught me off guard. I thought it looked amazing. And instead of the usual cheers you get when the title card appears, we got a few wows and oohs and ahs instead, which was awesome. But before I ramble anymore, please do consider subscribing. Let me know what you thought of the film in the comments below. And with that, all that's left to do is to thank you very much for watching.